Morning, folks. Talking Point here, WESN, your content capital. Did you miss us? We missed you. It's been an interesting weekend, I guess you could say. Some interesting things have come up into the news. Of course, we don't follow every single story of crime and death, the tragedy of that traffic accident notwithstanding. Rest in peace to that poor young lady who is looking forward to the rest of her life. And of course, there's stuff going on around the world. It's a hell of a way to live, I guess you could say, when tragedy abounds. And we have to go on business as usual. Of course, today, no co-hosts. I know. It's almost like if fate just teased us a little bit with one appearance last week. But hopefully, we shall see him more regularly. Hashtag re-release Keaton Shaw. Let's see if the next hashtag works. Meanwhile, of course, the ASP is expected today to speak about more issues on crime. I understand, Mr. San Fernando, you wish I could be more hard on the ASP. My only question is, what would you expect him to say, given his authority and actual capacity to speak? On one hand, your implication, your unspoken implication is correct. He is a representative of the TTPS. On the other hand, the press secretary of the President of the United States is still not the President of the United States. Although, in that regard, they function more with a capacity than any local public relations person in TNT, in my opinion. But we'll save that for when he comes. Of course, we have a lot to get through this morning, so let's kick off today's Daily Review. And to me, the most, not necessarily alarming story, but I guess the most relevant one, because it can affect change now to some degree, and that's debatable, is the, I guess you could say, response to the letter in response to the request for a meeting. And I'm speaking of the fact that in the opposition's response to the government's response to the opposition's letter to the initial inquiries into the meeting over national security, there are already disagreements coming from various opposition quarters. Some of it are actual disagreements. Some of it right now are being touted in the form of a question or phrased in the form of a question, as opposed to definitive statements that are being combative, I guess you could say, against what the government gave the opposition in their letter of response. So many responses at this point, I can't keep up. Now, both the opposition leader and the political leader of the NTA gave statements to one local media house, I believe more than one local media house. Now, the opposition leader has multiple questions on multiple fronts. One of the main things is the fact that the Prime Minister is not going to appear at the meeting. He did say the AG will chair, the Minister of National Security is included, the Minister of Everything / Minister of Energy and Energy Affairs, Stuart Young, is included. So it's not as though it's lacking with significant, pertinent people. Right? Because if you want to get anything done, half the time you need Stuart Young to help you get it done in this country. And technically you can't exclude the Minister of National Security, and you should include the AG, right, on a practical level. And then the Minister of Tourism is also included. I can't remember who the fifth member is off the top of my head, but I believe the main thing is the Prime Minister, who he was quick to point out when dealing with the Gary Griffith list withdrawal, that technically is not about Gary Griffith, but it is, but it isn't. He touted the fact that he was the head of the National Security Council. So it's somewhat strange when, in theory, both the head of the National Security Council and the head of the executive for the government is not included in any sort of talks where you want to get to some sort of resolution, which actually, in a way, kind of undermines the next part of the government's position a little bit more. Because if this was wanting to be like a streamlined, no frills, let's just get to some serious talks and get to some decisions fast, well, it's best to have the Prime Minister there, right? But then now Guy Griffith points out, well, technical experts were not allowed. Now, I can't remember if I did not see that he directly referred to himself. Because basically they said, it was supposed to be members of the two parties, right? But then it was specified by the government as parliamentarians. So that excludes technical experts. Is Gary referring to himself as a technical expert, or is he trying to be gracious, or at least give the veneer of grace, by not referring to his own status and referring to the situation in general, and speaking more directly towards other technical experts, other people with experience in the field and knowledge in the field, right? Either way, I mean, it is an interesting decision on how he communicated, but his point remains, he referred to the fact that the opposition leader wanted to include all stakeholders. Now, this wasn't necessarily well defined, but at the time I brought up the fact, and I still have misgivings, how many do you want to include? Because at some point it will turn from the opposition government having talks to the opposition government attending a seminar where the technical experts that each side brings will give a series of lectures on whichever topic, and what very likely will happen then is that they won't actually get anywhere. They'll just hear a lot of stuff, some of which may or may not be directly pertinent to TNT's situation as you bring out theoretical things and blah, blah, blah. And you get a lot of information, and you'll have to spend so much time just sorting through what is pertinent and what is not pertinent that by the time you get through that process, there'll probably, won't be enough time to actually get a decision. Or these consultations will take a pretty long time, aka forever. So in my mind, I was fine if the opposition wanted to include one or two pertinent people, or what made more sense to me was, well, why don't you speak to the experts you want to talk to for the bulk of your information, right? And again, if there is one thing where you really need the experts to explain it, it's very technical, it's very difficult to explain, maybe you want a relatively third-party person to put forward some of this information because, coming from you, government might not buy it, but coming from somebody that has credentials in the area, it might be different, right? And as Gary Griffith pointed out, government ministers and all ministries have technical experts to help them understand the various functions of their ministries on that level, right? Not everybody that's in charge of a ministry is an expert in the field that the ministry is of. Usually, the Minister of National Security, the world over, if a proper civilian elected representative, will not have a lot of expertise in that field, and they will rely on the military experts underneath him to advise him. He is the civilian oversight over everything to give the elected, well, the people's elected representative, he's their voice. Right? But he's also, to some extent, the voice for the various services of whichever national security is armed to the wider government and the people. He's a channel of communication. He's not an expert himself. Of course, when you get like a former army officer, sometimes it's fine, sometimes it's partially a sign of a dictatorship. But that's besides the point. So I can understand where Guy is coming from, where for parliamentarians just go in without any technical experts, on the surface at least sounds like a disaster, because the flip side is, well, they barely know anything of anything, and their private and personal perceptions and opinions in some cases might be no better than the man on the street, And that's not necessarily going to be useful to get to any sort of accurate and effective solution. But again, you don't need to take all the experts into the meeting, because the more heads that have to speak, the longer it will take, the more drawn out it will take, and it could derail the whole purpose, which is to actually speak. Some of the issues might be administrative, government, legislative, and yes, you want experts, but at some point, the two sides of parliament or the two political sides have to come together to make certain decisions, and the experts can't make it for them. So, going back to what I said, the government now, not including the Prime Minister, however, kind of undermines the concept of, well, we want to get a resolution now. We want this to be smooth and efficient. We want this to be as quickly as possible. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be fast. Just that it's not going to be drawn out in perpetuity. So on one hand, making it lean, 5 on 4, although then there's also the question of 5 on 4, right? Government gets 5, we get 4. All right, I don't know why the Minister of Tourism is included. I really don't, but whatever. By keeping it lean, by keeping it just 9 people, 8 would be even better. It allows the meeting a chance to actually, everybody could have their say, could hash out issues without having too many people to make it unwieldy. But the Prime Minister is not going to be there, so at some point they're going to have to go back to Cabinet to get their marching orders, unless he decided, well, between Young, Hines, and the AG, you all have near carte blanche, but I highly doubt that. I highly doubt that. Then again, the Minister of everything, who knows what the ratio, the share of responsibility in the office of the Prime Minister is between the Prime Minister and the Minister in the office of the Prime Minister, Stewardship. But that's speculation. That's not worthwhile. Again, the Prime Minister of the National Security Council, he's not there. So at this point, why not let the UNC bring in other stakeholders and make it into a seminar, and then, let it be the political dog and pony show that it's already looking like it's going to end up being. Because they haven't even met yet, and they can't seem to even agree on the details of the meeting, the terms of the meeting. It's a hell of a thing, right? Personally, I don't know if maybe the people need to voice a consensus on what they want to see out of this in order to push it through, or maybe there needs to be a third-party arbitrator, because the AG is chairing the meeting. I go back and forth with him. I don't know if that's a good thing if the AG is chairing the meeting. On one hand, he seems to be intelligent, well-spoken, an upright citizen who had some very bad snafus and questionable ethical decisions in key areas. Is he trustworthy? I'm not going to say no. It's kind of hard to say 100% yes. So him chairing the meeting, I don't know. At least he's not one of those professional politician blowhards that's going to heavily politicize everything every time he opens his mouth. So maybe an arbitrator would have been better, but then again, now it's a fine one, and this thing might be over before it even begins, folks. At a time when one would think parliamentarians would see, hey, they're starting to have less and less people off limits. Maybe I should be concerned if I let things get too far out of hand, how far it could go. I'll leave the implications up to you. But, right now, everybody seems to still be wanting to play politics with the situation. Although, to be fair, it's not as though either side has gone off the rails yet. So let's wait and see, unfortunately. Crime waits for no one, but I guess we have no choice here. What comes out of it? All right, next story. This one, it's strange because it bothers me. It's not completely surprising, but I don't know if there's going to be a solution to something like this anytime soon, but we'll see. There's a teacher shortage. The teachers union is well, the Teachers Association is basically saying that they need something done about it urgently because it is beginning to affect operations at schools around the country. I take that to mean that we're not talking one or two schools. We're talking about the general situation overall of schools. Obviously, there will be some schools that might be relatively fine. And it would be nice if we got more information, but, you know, we're not really a country where people make statements and give out all the information or even have all the information. So they might be limited to their impression of the situation, but since they're the association. And one of the things is the concern about attracting and retaining talented individuals while the teaching population ages, and there's a concern that you don't have young teachers to the expected eventual mass exodus, right? I don't know to what extent, like what fraction of the teachers will be expected to leave all at once, but it's expected at some point they get a significantly higher ratio of retirements. And they're concerned that they don't necessarily have a balance of young teachers coming in significant numbers at once. It's not enough that they come in at a steady rate because of the aging teacher population and an expectation of retirements, a large number at the same time. They're worried about that specific hiccup. Now, the Ministry of Education is saying, well, okay, we have 200 teachers graduated from the teacher induction training earlier this year, and then I think they have other tranches of teachers in the work. However, she goes on to say, well, training of approximately 400 teachers in restorative practices, changing the mindset and paradigm of our schools or school climate. I don't necessarily know how that helps because you're just, you know, you're sending already existing teachers to get training, you know, to change their mindsets or approach to certain things. While a lot of the issues with regards to teachers is, you know, salaries, and therein lies a large problem. You know, it's a catch-22, right? How much do you value the people that's supposed to educate the future of the nation? I don't know. And I do think that also, if you pay teachers higher salaries, will you get better teachers? Basic economics says yes. You see those economic forces play out in health sectors around the world in various ways. I don't want to take the time to explain it, but it's more complicated than that. Improve teacher training and professional development. And I guess professional development includes not just, you know, the ability to advance in the sector. Because at some point, you know, you look at the job of teaching and generally it's people who will see the duty and will be fine in relatively the same job for a significant amount of time in their career. Provide adequate teacher appreciation activities. I mean, I guess, but that's probably not that big of a thing on a resource perspective and an initiative perspective. And the association has some part to play, maybe not the main part, but some part to play with that. Support and advocacy for teachers and creating suitable and supporting working environments. I think the last part is a big deal. Salaries is a big question. That doesn't necessarily mean you raise it very high or you raise it at all. You know, that's complicated. Suitable and supporting working environments. That one, because of, you know, there's so many things that could factor into that. Renovations into schools not being done, not being adequate, school facilities not being adequate. Of course, in this heat, if you don't have AC, I don't know how you function. So, of course, for the students in the classroom, teachers are in the classrooms too. They're not stuck in the same classroom every day, but you know what I mean, right? Is the teacher's room air conditioned? I would say if the students' classrooms are air conditioned, the teacher's room should be air conditioned. If the teacher's room is air conditioned, the students have to suffer for the whole day. Well, I don't know if I care about your complaints that much, but generally speaking, supportive working environment. It's also with regards to the students themselves and the behavioral issues that we're seeing. Now, to what extent is that a responsibility of the individual schools and the staff of the schools, and to what extent is that the responsibility of the ministry? And to what extent is that a societal problem? So there's a lot of complicated things interconnected with this situation. But at the end of the day, a staff shortage at schools, teacher shortage. That's what the association is saying. More numbers will be beneficial. 200 teachers graduated from the 2022-2023 induction training. Is that relatively a lot? You see, there's no context here. And a lot of the times they throw out these figures. We don't have enough of this. Thank you, union. There's no context to that statement. And then the government today will say, well, we brought X hundred number of Y to replace them. And again, there's no context with regards to that statement, right? And of course, one of the issues is retaining these teachers. So we might train them, and then how many of them stay? Like in any profession or any job, right? So, I mean, I think teaching is a noble profession. I think there are a lot of teachers, well, maybe not a lot, but there definitely are some teachers, like police officers, who they're just there to collect a check, and they're not there for the vocational part of the job. They're not committed. How many is that? I don't know. But we can't use that as an excuse to just, say, well, that's the problem. They're not committed. No, there are some committed teachers. If none of the teachers were committed, the system will fall apart. And to say that there are not challenges in the situation, because again, the Ministry of Education probably does not have enough money to run its operations, which is why teachers are resorting to asking parents for things like paper and office supplies, etc., etc. You know the drill. You have kids, you know the drill. It's only the future of the nation, That's not, people always bring up what Edward Williams said about it, but it's almost as though we're willing to we're celebrating the statement, we're not actually implementing it properly in modern times. But what do you give up? Or maybe, an audit of the Ministry of Education is required, something that goes back even beyond this administration, to be honest. But I'll leave that there. There's more stories to get into before the SP comes in, but let's take a break right now. When we return, there's a couple more things, including another staff shortage situation, which is very ironic given what happened last week. Stay tuned to Talking Point on WESN. We'll be right back.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
Let the home store turn your house into a home you love. Get everything you need to give your home that special look and feel. We offer household items, lawn and garden, paint center, hardware, plumbing, lighting and electrical, toys and storage solutions. 5 convenient locations: 6th Avenue Barataria, The Falls at Westmore, Pennywise Plaza Shoguanas, C3 Center Branch and C3 San Fernando. Check out our Facebook page for more information and come visit us today. The Home Store. Turn your house into a home you love.
Alan's Funeral Home, Tunapuna. Relax. We know the loss of a loved one can be challenging, but we've got your back for all your funeral needs, from documents to the service and or burial. Let Alan's Funeral Home take care of you and your loved ones. We are located on the Eastern Main Road in Tunapuna. Call us today at 663-1829 or visit allansfuneralhome.com. Alan's Funeral Home. Let us take care of business.
WSN, the only station in the nation broadcasting in HD. That's why we look so much better than everyone else. Also, shout out to our creative team, Rodney and Josh, there for the new look. If we didn't do so, every now and then, it's good to give them their props. Master control in the back, working smooth as ever, finally. But anyway, moving through these stories a little bit faster than the first one. Now, some more, I don't know if to call it information or just claims made about the rate increase for TNTech came out, this time by TNTech. Which is funny because, you know, the last thing that I read about them, and maybe I didn't read everything, was that somebody in TNTech said, well, one of the best things for TNTech would be for the government to pay its bill. Well, now it has come out that TNTech has a, hold on, let me get this figure here. A $9.32 billion debt, inclusive of its debt to the National Gas Company. TNTech has also apparently taken out loans, $6.4 billion in loans, with which to pay over the years its costs in order to continue operating. $4.2 billion in interest and $6.4 billion in principal over the 4 years of 2022 to 2026, and that's what's in its business plan. I don't know what else is being left out, right? The 9.32 says inclusive of its debt to NGC. It doesn't say that it's all of its debt to NGC. So of course some of that loan money was used to pay off NGC. There's a lot missing. There's a lot of context that I don't get. More importantly, there's a lot of questions with regards to how is it that the situation got this bad. And it's almost as though somebody was trying to kind of squeak by with this whole rate increase thing and the government owing TNTech $1 billion plus, you know, every year, if not more than $2-3 billion. And now TNTech is in debt. Well, I mean, it makes sense how they're going to operate without collecting revenue. But now the question is, they need the rate increase to help, you know, make their operations more feasible. They're not even talking about wiping out, paying off the debt. Now, the question, of course, is how high will the rate increase be? Well, for commercial, it's something along the lines of about 50%, I think, 50, 60%, somewhere around there. Whereas for commercial, it's anywhere as low as 15 to 64%. Commercial 51 to 63, residential 15 to 64. So we don't know what it is that's being proposed. Now, more electricity is going to be used in this heat wave. And the thing is, that scales because it's a rate, right? It's a rate. So they will get more money for more usage, whatever the rate is. The real question of what TNTech is saying, we need more revenue in order to ensure that we have enough cash on hand to prevent any issues with the reliability of supply. And in this heat wave, now, now it almost sounds like, you know, a little underhanded there, you know, like, yeah, you say, well, why? You're putting the onus on me, on everybody else, that probably can't survive on the average day of sun right now in the wet season. So Lord only knows what's going to happen in dry season. People will be living at Maracas and other beaches at this point because we might have a water shortage. So there'll be no such thing as pools and long showers and soaks in the bathtub. And if you have no electricity, you probably will have no water either because you need water to pump the water in your tanks during a water shortage, if we get there. So we don't want interruptions in supply. I get that. How did it get this bad? This reminds me of what they say about Social Security in the United States. You know, you just kick the problem down the road and you let somebody in the future deal with it. Why do you have to deal with it now? And it's like, okay, so it reached here now. They haven't had a rate increase since 2009. Now, I get it. It's not as though that means that they should have had a rate increase 2009 or 2010 or 2011. But we're in 2023, and they're saying we have $9 billion in debt. We have technically a loan repayment of 10.6 billion. So again, I don't know what the math is, right? I guess maybe they're anticipating interest over the next 3 years. And they use the debt, the loans to finance their operations. Whose bright idea was that? There even, words of a subsidy for TNTech. What's going on? Because I thought TNTech was the better of the two run public utilities. And to some extent, they still are. But at the same time, it seems like it's costing us a lot. To be fair, the needs of the equipment and safety and to keep things running, and then, it's not as though you could just take out chunks of the power grid at a time, and it's even more technical than water, from what I understand. So I get it, you pay upfront for things to get things done, but golly, how did it get this bad? And should we just accept this and move on? The thing is, I could see a rate increase. I don't think it'll be 15%. I think it might start at 30, maybe 20-something for the lowest. But I could be surprised. Government seems to not want to rock the boat, so maybe they'll try to get by with a small increase and then I don't know what, because they'll have to pay off the debt at some point. We already have Airbridge and Seabridge debt. We already have all sorts of other debt. Now we have the electricity debt too. All right, moving on. Staff shortages for teachers, staff shortages in customs. Some of the same points. This coming from the Public Service Association. And we'll get to the other story with them later, just now. But apparently they're saying there are 260 vacancies out of 693 positions in the division, a 37.5% vacancy rate. See, this is a little bit more context, right? Of course, the reasons why. Now, one of the things that they're saying is the salaries are one issue. The lowest ranking officers, they might have a salary as low as $6,000 a month, and change, which they state the argument, which I think is reasonable. It makes them vulnerable to accepting things like bribes, etc., because it's so low. A similar argument is made, in general with regards to police and law enforcement when salaries are too low. Granted, making salaries high does not necessarily solve those issues completely. At the end of the day, those who want to be crooked will be crooked, right? But there will be some who might feel almost forced or entitled in order to survive to take some little extra on the side. And it might be a little extra or it might be a lot extra for the big boys, the big things coming through. And salaries are low. They're also talking about they have not necessarily had an intake for new officers and guards that was expected. There was money allocated last year, and we're at the more or less the end of this fiscal year, right? We just had the new budget presentation, basically. But fiscal 2022, there was 27.9 million, so about 28 million allocated to hire and pay new staff, but they're saying we didn't really see new staff come out. And what also makes this interesting is the fact that the gun haul found last week, there is, I believe, one security expert who's basically saying, look, and this is assuming you have to kind of bring the weapons through, from your buyer through multiple channels. He says, in some ways, it might be more expensive to bring it through Latin America because you have to go through multiple jurisdictions. I assume he's talking about guns that you're smuggling from a manufacturer through Latin America, right? I would argue if you're literally buying guns from someone in Venezuela, that should be cheaper. I'm talking old guns, we ain't talking new guns. That should be cheaper than weapons coming from the States. So my assumption is he's talking about recently manufactured weapons from a buyer outside of Venezuela. So you have to get it to Venezuela through whichever countries it has to go through to get there, and then, of course, smuggle it through our maritime borders. And in some ways, you know, they are American gun manufacturers. You illegally get it from America to Trinidad. That, in some ways, could be a bit more efficient, a bit more direct. You know, there are a lot of AK-47s around the world, but some of that supply is going to be in Africa, it's going to be in the Middle East, it's going to be in Southeast Asia. So again, to get it to TNT, it might take a little bit more effort. It might just be easier to get guns through our customs from manufacturers, wherever the illegality starts. That's not what I'm here for, but through our customs, you know, whether it's the ports, whether it's the airports. National Geographic had the episode where they interdicted a firearm in a carry-on bag, 1 or 2 firearms in a carry-on bag at Miami International. That's years ago. And now, after, you know, we get this big gun haul, a security expert is saying, well, it probably came through customs. The minister, his argument for why guns aren't coming through the maritime borders is because they're coming through the legal borders. That's one hell of an excuse. So, for me to hear that customs has a staff shortage, to me to hear that, you know, their concerns that the salaries might be too low, and maybe they're not. Maybe you all think 6,000 for a customs entry-level position is good enough. I mean, they don't need to make, you know, 6 figures, but still. Anybody see the irony in this? There are a lot of problems. It's not just the scanners which are on the way next year. They're on the way next year. What about now? What about this year? I know it takes a long time for customs to clear things, but do they check everything? From what I understand, so even if it takes 2 weeks, you know, we could get a new shipment of 50 caliber rifles in here next month. We don't have enough staff to hand check everything. Well, even if they had full staff, they probably didn't have enough staff to hand check everything, and they don't have enough scanners. So, you know, the smuggling business is open, folks, from all quarters in TNT. All right, last story. This one, I'll just mention it. The head of the PSA is complaining that the minister's promise of back pay for unions that accepted the 4% offer. You know, it's well, he didn't use the word conspiracy, but it's almost like if that's what he's saying. He's saying, you know, back pay promise to cause trouble is one of the headlines. Let me just get. Finance Minister Coleman intended to set up trouble when he promised back pay to members of public sector unions who had accepted the 4%. That's what his reporter is saying. Here's the thing. I'm not saying that the minister is concerned by any trouble you have, Mr. Batiste, president of the PSA. The thing is, to get back pay, you have to have, I believe, a wage agreement. Because maybe I stand corrected, but I can't remember at this point in time. The various unions are negotiating for various time frames. I do think the 4% will apply to some degree retroactively as well. It's not just from here on moving forward. So, you know, when you are still negotiating, because a lot of unions are still negotiating for payment and back pay for years gone by, you know, 5 years ago, maybe in some cases more. You don't have the agreement in place, how are you going to get them back pay? And the thing is, I'm pretty sure the main reason why he did it is because he wanted to do something that would be popular with the population. And there's a lot more unions that are probably happy for it. And the PSA members want it. So to some extent, it's not that it was only just to have this effect on the PSA, but this is the effect he wanted across the board. The PSA is just one union. And at the end of the day, check and mate say, if your members want it, and you're holding fast a position that many of the other unions abandoned and left you, apparently, by yourself, what are you holding out for? Even if it's the wrong thing to do, if the members want it, at the end of the day, to some extent, Try to convince them all you want, by all means, but if you fail to convince them on a different course of action, ethically speaking, what right do you have to deny them, especially when they see every other union head capitulates? Because reasonably, it implies that there are reasons, reasonable, sound logic. You might not like the logic, you might not like the increase, but there are reasons why they capitulated, and now the members have to say, why did they? Why is it that they decided to go with this minimal 4% business? What changed their minds? It's always something with this union, the PSA. Mr. Bitty's predecessor, we all know who that is. This union, to me, is the poster child. You know, with the other unions, it's in degrees between good functioning and the PSA. The PSA seems to me to be at the bottom of the barrel, because there's too many instances where the members complain about the president. For years now, we've been hearing this, for better or worse. Why? So, if I was a PSA member, I would potentially look to see what I could do to permanently get this situation changed. What that means, I can't tell you. But I need to take a break right now. When we return, we'll welcome the ASP to talk about some practical considerations on crime, and maybe I'll also put him a little bit on the hot seat, Mr. San Fernando. I understand, but still, there's a limit to what's practical. More into that when we come back.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
My name is Carl Media. I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
Let the home store turn your house into a home you love. Get everything you need to give your home that special look and feel. We offer household items, lawn and garden, paint center, hardware, plumbing, lighting and electrical, toys and storage solutions. 5 convenient locations: 6th Avenue Barataria, The Falls at Westmore, Pennywise Plaza Shoguanas, C3 Center Branch and C3 San Fernando. Check out our Facebook page for more information and come visit us today. The Home Store. Turn your house into a home you love.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios, but they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
You gave us the inspiration to be first. We gave you the solutions that put you first. You walked with us side by side, and we continued to serve you with pride. First Citizen celebrates with you 30 years of achieving dreams, shaping success stories, and painting brighter futures together. And together, we'll accomplish so much more. First Citizens, together, 30 and beyond.
From Maracas Bay to Arafita Avenue and Piaco, Richard's Bake and Shag brings the world's most popular fish sandwich closer to you. Open daily at all our locations.
Alan's Funeral Home, Tunapuna. Relax. We know the loss of a loved one can be challenging, but we've got your back for all your funeral needs, from documents to the service and or burial. Let Alan's Funeral Home take care of you and your loved ones. We are located on the Eastern Main Road in Tunapuna. Call us today at 663-1829 or visit allansfuneralhome.com. Alan's Funeral Home. Let us take care of business.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Talking About, ladies and gentlemen, where the SPNI, he's here. We just had a debate with regards to some of the news last week. To be fair, you know, it's as though I could refute his opinions on the matter, but we had to save that off air, folks. We had to save that for off air. We do have things to speak about on air, so of course I welcome the ASP in here to speak with me. You're on the hot seat, sir. I've been told I'm too soft on you, despite the fact that I know.
Serious?
You're not the Commissioner of Police.
You just be soft on me?
Yeah, it's be
but anyway,
real soft.
Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago, and all the viewers on WSN. As you say, the hot seat again. But at the end of the day, we had some. I just want to, based on just spin off on the conversation.
Yeah. So give us a comment about the stuff that happened last week.
There was a lot
give
of
us some
there was a lot of things that happened last week. We had the issues with the shooting of the Deputy Commissioner of Prisons.
Mm-hmm.
There were also the two incidents where two police officer vehicles was also shot at, one in South and one in the Barrater area. And we had the fine of the number of the cashier firearms. There was a lot of controversial issues about the cashier firearms. The public was all about. But at the end of the day, I want to bring to the public that the threat is real. And the level of caliber of weapons that we are seeing in the hands of the criminal element, whether our opinions may vary in different circles, but in Trinidad and Tobago, let us be real. The threat is real, and the criminal elements are getting their hands on high-power weapons.
Well, because in my mind, applying logic to the situation, logically, a smart criminal would not want to bring in something, you know, overgunned when they don't have to. So I thought it's very unlikely that a 50 caliber rifle is going to be used to rob a little old lady or something, or a home invasion. However, while I might think that it makes more sense that criminals will bring it in for a specific purpose, you're saying not so fast. Sometimes it's just, you know, a status symbol and they might use it for some random crime that we can't anticipate.
Exactly. So the intelligence is still being, the information is still coming in. It is an active investigation to get more information to understand what is taking place. But on the surface, I think the area that we're supposed to look at is the confirmation of the type of weapons that is in the hands of the criminal. That's all I'm saying on air for that, with respect to that conversation. It's something that we need to consider.
I
right?
mean,
so
this is a step above what we've seen before, correct?
Exactly. Right. But then we have the other issue that I want to deal with this morning, which is the issue of fraud. And many persons normally would come and ask about fraud, that they have incidents where they believe they were defrauded, as the case may be, or make a report that is along the line of fraud. Right? We have a fraud department, or they call it fraud squad in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And just for general information, I'm going to share with you, our head office is in Port of Spain. We have a south office within San Fernando. We have an east office in San Grande. And within the last 2 years, an office was opened in Tobago. So we have 4 locations where persons could go and make the report as it concerns with fraud. Now, Fraud Squad deals with fraud, but of a complex nature. And when I say of a complex nature, it may be fraud within the banking sector, fraud in terms of land documentation, that you'll have to do a little more research, where you have fraudulent documents being put.
Like your ownership of a house or car.
Land and all of those.
There was a story a couple of weeks ago where there was fraud with regards to licensing and transfer of ownership of a car and all of that.
So the Fraud Squad deals with those complex, but any report of a fraud can be reported at any police station. Right? Depending on the nature of the fraud, they will be referred to the fraud department, the Fraud Squad, and on the advice of, or with the guidance of the specialists at fraud, they would assist the officers to deal with the investigation from a station perspective, divisional perspective. But when it becomes very complex, they treat with those type of fraud matters.
Well, so there's 2 levels that I want to ask. The first one, let's kind of keep it for the everyday people. What sort of crimes, fraud that normal citizens could be at risk at, or might be very common for citizens to fall prey to?
So the common thing that we have right now, and there's a number of situations that we have been dealing with, the Fraud Squad have been dealing with, and has several bulletins and pointers that were sent out with respect to the use of online banking. Right? So that is very technical. So it's parallel investigation with our cyber unit together with the Fraud Squad, because you have transactions taking place in different forms.
Somebody is posing as you and manipulating the system?
Yes, exactly. Then we have scammers, and you know, there was a lot of issues with several banks that fall prey to this type of behavior. It is still happening. Now we have your bank, your bank cards, now you have chips.
Right, yes. Before they would take the electronic, they would scan that.
So these chips now, you can do point of sale up to a certain limit.
Yes.
So we have to be cognizant of that.
Right.
Because some banks have a limit. Let's just use a figure of 300. I think some banks have about a 300.
I think it's 350, maybe 450.
So if you would have lost your bank card or got your bank card stolen,
there's no yes.
Within the space of 24 hours,
you
can make multiple $300 maximum limit transactions before it is registered onto the system. By the time the system picks it, you make a report to the bank, and the bank pick it up. A lot of transactions already gone through. Right? So persons have to understand that we talk about public safety and security. And we talk about physical public safety and security, of securing your home and securing your vehicle and securing your person. But at the same time, when you're talking about securing your finance, is something that we don't really, it sometimes it's a little taboo. People don't want to talk about it because they don't want to talk about how much money they have and what they want.
Yeah.
But it's important.
But I mean, you're not talking about $3,000 at a time. You're talking about, you might, death by 1,000 cuts, 350, 350, 350,
Right.
350.
And then they use these bank cards at the same time, credit cards and debit cards, make transactions from online and international. So you're swiping and you're buying items on different platforms, on different websites. Those transactions are going in. And even when you check when you check your online, some people, well, a majority of persons are online banking. When you check your credit card, you don't see those transactions appearing immediately. It takes some time to go on.
Yeah.
So it's only after the fact.
Depending on the timing of the billing.
Yeah.
Right.
And then
you will know.
Then after the fact, you realize you're missing money. When you go into the banking system, then you have the whole process to go through to do verification and all of those type of things. So the fraud squad works directly and with all the banking institutions at Trinidad and Tobago. So when these things do happen, they work side by side to find out what is transpiring, and if it falls in the category of fraud, they would take it over. Sometimes the bank would deal with it because it may be some kind of issue in the bank that they will have to treat with, but at the end of the day, it's a crime.
Do you know who has financial liability? I would imagine direct money theft and credit card fraud might be slightly different things with regards to that.
With my experience, I know there was some questionable transactions on my account already.
Right, yes, I remember last week, yeah.
I would have gone into the bank would have addressed it, treated with it. I got back the monies, and after I did all the relevant verification that they were asking me to do,
right,
and it's part of the process, so I had to do it.
Yeah.
Whether it was cumbersome or not, I had to follow through. I had to wait the time period for verification at the end of the day because it's a process, and at the end of the process, I was able to get back my money.
In your case?
In my specific case, I was able to get back the money back into my account, and I was informed personally as to what transpired. The bank now will have to deal with it from there. The bank is now taking that, is looking at it from their perspective to increase their security arrangements in the bank.
Well, I just want to point out, I do know that in general there will be other cases, not just because the ASP is a police officer that he got any sort of special treatment, right? But I'm trying to remember. I mean, it might very much depend on the individual circumstances, but also to some extent, you can't be reckless with your information on your card and your behavior, and you can't defy what it is they're telling you if you want them to treat with you in that manner. So not just obey the instructions, but then like even beforehand, it's one thing if somebody stole money from me. It's the next thing if I lost, rhetorically speaking, if my behavior directly contributed into the situation, will the banks be a lot less, willing to facilitate taking up the financial responsibility on their end?
It all depends on the individual circumstance and the nature of that particular transaction that they're dealing with. The bank has their policies, the police has their policies. Right? And
technically, y'all are not exactly the same thing. So what the bank is interested in resolving the situation with regards to certain aspects of the money, y'all are more interested in
the criminal aspect,
whether
offenses and who would have perpetrated those offenses. And at the same time, when we identify that there is a trend, we would send out tips. Now, there's another issue that takes place right now where we talk about investments. A lot of persons looking to do investments, right? And this has through the fraud department, it has reared its head, and they have advised that.
Is it in the form of what looks like a legitimate business investment, or is it just like a scheme? Because I know in China, you could kind of get both. You could kind of get, the uncle thinks that he could quadruple your money really fast, and you don't know exactly what it is he's investing it in, or is it, somebody in a suit with a used car salesman pitch, this is the business of the future, and then, 6 weeks later, the office that he was renting is vacated.
It varies, but it's on the umbrella of investments. Everybody wants to set something for the future.
Especially now.
Right, especially now. So they would have listen to certain persons make a pitch at you. It sounds nice. It sounds feasible. It sounds it ticking off all the boxes that you believe is the boxes that you want to tick, and you decide to invest.
The boxes that you want to tick, not necessarily the boxes that for security.
No, because it's an investment, and these are some of the things that is very difficult. Now, this is one of the more complex one because it takes different platforms. So you would have been, and it falls under the. So it's technically like phishing online at the same time.
Also, some of these scams are not even like a local body. It could be a foreign.
It could be. So there's where the
could be, or even though it's online, it could be.
So there's what the technical and complexity of these crimes are. So you would go online, you would see an IP address, you would see a website, and sometimes a website, or you even get a connection. Only recently, a colleague would have called and asked to get some advice on what was taking place. They would have invested in a transaction, something like Forex. Right? So, some Forex transaction, and they thought everything was good because that individual would have done Forex already, right? Sorry, I don't want to say Forex directly. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, would have done transactions online, and would have been Forex and along the line. So it was beneficial. No, what they got in another conversation with someone else, invested through a local bank. They had to put money through a local bank, and the money turned over. And when time to receive the benefits, they were asked again to deposit more money in order to get the benefit.
It sounds like a new version of the Nigerian prince scam, or the whatever prince from it. It has to be,
So these things, the public would go through the whole process, invest until they reach the point where they say, when after they finish all the transactions and money has been exchanging through online platform, then after the fact, then they will come to the fraud squad and make a report that they are of the opinion that this is no longer true. So then the fraud has to go through the whole complexity of doing tracing to find out everything, because you would have willingly engaged in that transaction. No force, no duress, nothing at all.
Would a pyramid scheme also be like this?
Similar. It's similar.
But usually victims are at the end of the scheme.
Right, so that is where these type of investigations, and a lot of persons get caught in it.
Yeah, of course, especially when it gets that big. Yeah.
And we encourage persons to report it, because reporting it would not only help another person to fall prey to it, but it will give us an opportunity to understand the climate of online transactions and the level of fraud that is taking place. Right, so it's a twofold for us when we respect to that.
But do you, again, I assume this is where you mentioned it earlier, you get the problem people don't want to admit when they might have been...
They have been duped, as the case may be, in going into these schemes. So it is a very complex situation. It is very intimate, I might say, because it's your money you're dealing with. And when you make a bad transaction or a bad investment, it has implications to both you and your family for the future. So this is why we continue to tell the public, if these things happen, come forward, because you can help someone else.
Folks, if it seems too good to be true, it 99.999999999% of the time it normally is. You want to take that 0.1% chance that it's actually real. Get some real good advice before you commit to anything, and get all your paperwork in order, and take a few other steps, whatever you feel, and even then it might not be enough. Be wary of these things. But folks, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll open the phone lines here on Talking Point, and I might even, put the ASP on a little bit more of a hot seat before we get any calls. But, stay tuned for that. We'll be right back. Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity, from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
You gave us the inspiration to be first. We gave you the solutions that put you first. You walked with us side by side, and we continued to serve you with pride. First Citizens celebrates with you 30 years of achieving dreams, shaping success stories, and painting brighter futures together. And together, we'll accomplish so much more. First Citizens, together, 30 and beyond.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
My name is Carl Media. I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays, 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Site, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
Welcome back to Talk About, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, now is the time with the phone lines. There's a lot that we could speak about. Of course, the opposition and the government, they're still going back and forth with regards to the terms of the meeting. Just remember, the actual meeting will then have them having discussions or going back and forth on the terms of whatever the plans are. So this is the pre-argument before the argument, right? This might actually be the pre-argument, but who knows? And of course, word came out with regards to customs having a manpower shortage. Some people think, some experts think the guns came through our legal borders. They weren't smuggled on a pirogue. I actually think they might have been smuggled by a pirogue, but at the end of the day, my opinion is just the limited opinion of one private citizen with no practical experience in these matters, to be fair. And of course, there are other things that we spoke about. The SP brought up the topic about fraud, which somebody that I know is going through that right now, really, and it's a hell of a process. So always tell people to be cautious. If you have more questions about that, if you have a situation that you would like some general advice, not legal advice, you could call in for some general questions on procedural matters or technicalities, call in on that if you so wish. But while we wait on the first phone call, I want to kind of re-emphasize a point. The police got these guns, right? However it was gotten, they didn't get a suspect. Maybe the criminals knew that somebody was monitoring the guns and it was time to abandon it, although that was a hell of an amount of guns to abandon, right? But it brings up the point where a lot of people, when it comes to crime, to be fair, we complain about the police service. But for stuff to come in, it doesn't go through y'all. It goes through other services, areas of responsibility first, and then you all kind of have to clean up the mess afterwards.
Yes, and unfortunately, sometimes those things do happen. And that is where I want to bring the point where we're talking about, in respect to fraud, where we're talking about documentation. Right?
Yes, because an environment where fraud and corruption exists can allow for these bigger crimes to...
You always have both international and local transaction, you have documentation. And it is important that if you know you are engaged in any transaction that require providing or sourcing particular type of document to facilitate those transactions, it is important that you do some verification of signatures, make sure that the documents are authenticated in a proper manner, that when it is presented to you, and you have to do transactions with it, it can stand the scrutiny of the organization that is dealing with it. And these are things that we know. We have heard stories and reports, and persons have been put before the court for forging signatures.
There was a prison officer who was, I don't know if he's been charged, but basically he submitted a fake academic certificate.
Yes, and we also had persons in different organizations that would have forged documentation, manipulate information to facilitate
records,
facilitate transactions. That is how complex, as I said, the level of fraud investigation will have to be dealt with.
Now here's the thing, because sometimes we might get, we might feel, listen, I'm not hurting anybody. I just want to do this little thing to kind of facilitate my little small whatever, right? My small transaction, right? Nobody getting hurt, nobody getting killed, I'm not robbing nobody, but I might still be trying to shortcut the system. And we're not just talking about, asking for help or a favor. That's bad enough, right? Because, that has its own slippery slope. But we're talking about, I might try to do a little something, my small little fraud and corruption not hurting nobody. But to some extent, by having an environment that easily allows that, isn't this just creating and fostering an environment that eventually, one could argue already, it will then lead up to bigger and bigger levels of fraud and higher levels of crime, to the point where instead of smuggling some fruit that's not supposed to come into the country, now somebody's smuggling ammunition and rifles.
No, I will answer this way. Small fraud, big fraud is same fraud.
Well, there you go.
Right? Small offense, big offense is the same offense. But it all depends, the implications and the ramification of both of them. So from the level of the fraud squad that we have in our fraud squad department in Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the level of complexity and the implications, it has a wide implication. So yes, from the man who said that I just do a little small something, but he do something small and then we have another person do something small, and we have known, and society has accommodated a lot of simple fraudulent practices. You sign a document for someone. You sign a receipt.
You sign in for somebody who is late or absent at the job.
So all of these these small things add up. And one of our advert callers on this program always say enforcement of all laws.
Yes.
And it come back to me that but if it's about enforcement, it's an offense. It is an offense. As small as we might see it, it may not have impact a big circle, but it undermines the processes, it undermines our integrity. And that is where we are grappling with right now, because transparency becomes no longer become transparent. It becomes a gray area now.
Because whatever back channels you have to get your shipment of radios fast-tracked, and we don't need to scan it. And then all of a sudden,
Exactly.
you know, tins of juice, we don't need to scan it, and it's not juice in the tins.
So with the complexity of fraud, we have various types of things. We have the point of sales, we have the credit cards, then we have documentations. We have documentations and records that are manipulated. So it's a wide variety or wide scope of how fraud can happen across the landscape of doing business.
Well, folks, we have a first caller from the morning, and I do believe this just might be the caller who says, enforce all laws. We have on the line with us from Chagonas. Good morning. You're on the air.
Yes, I waste my time calling you to give out the answer, because I have said this for the longest while. And the administrative is where you review your entire procedure and you come up with a solution. And what should be done, having meetings with the Prime Minister and things are useless. What should be done is the public service should research the matter, put up their views, and that should be available to the public, and everybody should be able to comment on it. Because the answer is simple, and as you said, enforce all your laws. Thank you, unless you have a question.
No, well, I don't have a question. I might have missed some of the things that you said, but at the end of the day, it comes back down to that simple principle: enforce all the laws. I understand your response last week. I know what you meant. There are areas in the legislation that need updating, or a lot of, like, you know, house cleaning, housekeeping to be done to kind of, you know, make it practical. But the flip side is there will be some, you know, businesses, councillors, community leaders, whatever, who is like, well, we've been doing this, we've been parking on the Eastern Main Road for however long. It's like, yeah, but, I mean, that's actually in some ways a hard one when you have businesses.
No, how do you enforce all your laws? That's a simple thing I don't understand.
Well, I'm just saying, Professor, when you have businesses that...
to have it amended, it's simple.
I mean, are we going to have to pay for the business to be relocated off the Eastern Main Road?
No. They have to pay. You have to have planning permission, you know.
To be fair to you, Professor, we can't afford to pay them, so you might be very right. They have to pay.
We don't have to pay them. We don't have to. If it's anything, they have to pay.
All right, thank you, Professor.
Okay, gentlemen.
At some point we might literally just have to enforce our laws and come down hard on.
It's how we should say, between a rock and a hard place. Enforcement of all the laws that we know, in fact, can be easily enforced, right? It's simple. Along the Eastern Main Road, there's no parking, right? On both sides. Ticketing everybody along the Eastern Main Road. It's an option for the police.
Yeah.
Of enforcing what is there, right, and zero tolerance on crime, on crime and offense. But it has implications. It has implications on the trust and confidence of the police and how we treat certain things, and there's a lot of things that will be affected.
Well, I think one thing is that's where the customer service needs to improve, but then the other thing is there might be some situations where, like, the systems around those laws might not be working very well. So to have the population, you expect them to do things completely by the book, when the bureaucracy of, say, I don't want to get into specific examples. I can't remember the one I was thinking about. We have a call on the line. Dabadi. Good morning, caller.
A very pleasant morning to you, to the ASB, and to my friend in South Trinidad and the professor. I want to direct the question to the ASP. ASP, I want to congratulate the TTPS with respect to the fines they have been making over the past 2 weeks. And I want to give a little point because I always ask for solutions whenever I am making my commentary. And I remember around 1995 or around 1995 when Giuliani was mayor of New York City. Dinkins had just left and Giuliani had taken over. And they went after the soft crimes, minor offenses. And what they were able to do is that they were able to pick up a lot of serious criminals and serious crimes offenders. I'm wondering if the TTPS has tried that, because with a broken light out, a man, well, there are no things that here to jump, but small offenses that the normal man on patrol would park the car and not pay any attention to it, and those could be the ones who are the criminals. Have we ever tried that? And I think we should give that a try. A 0% tolerance on all minor offenses, road traffic offenses, and other things. I'll hang up and listen, and I think that I would like to wish you all the best in the future and keep on doing a good job.
No, Kola, thanks very much, and that's a very important and a critical point that the caller is making there. You would have heard that the commissioner and our executive indicating that if we could get back our streets, take control of our streets, and in the context of taking control of our streets, we realize that every time you hear a report, there was a vehicle involved, the person got away, and we would have found a vehicle abandoned the next one on a location.
Right.
We know criminal elements not walking anywhere. They're not using helicopters. They're not using bicycle. Right? It's cars. Cars are on the streets. Right? And they are going and do their acts with the use of vehicles. So we keep pushing the patrols and getting the officers to engage. Not, as the commissioner mentioned, not patrols alone, but patrols that is engaging, stop, inquire, take information, find out what you are doing in this area, right? Sometimes persons of the opinion, we get pushback from the public and say that, I am a law-abiding individual, I'm not a criminal, but at the end of the day, we need to do checks. We need to check some balances of everybody on the streets. We stop vehicles, we see suspicious looking vehicles, and we know our data indicating the type of vehicles that have been stolen or used in these criminal acts. We have also known that they're no longer using false number plates. They use number plates similar to that of legal vehicles.
Right.
Right? So by just watching the vehicle and you see a number plate, yes, the number plate is good, but so we have to stop the vehicle, we have to inquire, we have to make our checks, call, and do a verification of the vehicles. And that is how we can find out all of these things.
But I think what the caller was talking about, and while I'd never been to New York before the early 2000s, but it was still to some extent, I believe Giuliani was still the mayor, so you got to see some of the results of what he instituted, right? Of course, I'm just random observations in public, so I haven't seen everything. But I always, and of course, I'm in like the touristy or high foot traffic areas, or Times Square and the areas around the area. But there were a lot of physical police presence on the road. Well, not on the road in cars, but like on the sidewalks. Just, every few blocks, there's another pair of police officers just monitoring the situation. If you need any assistance, they'll be more than happy to give it to you. That might not necessarily be quite as practical here, especially with the heat right now, to just have two officers in the sun on a sidewalk waiting. But I think the point is, it's a combination of your presence in certain high foot traffic areas. So if there's a minor squabble, if there's a pickpocket, if something serious happens where, you know, I can't remember if there was some crime in a mall in town and they went into the mall.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
So things like that. If on the promenade now you had a higher police presence, not just one post with some officers at one location, but throughout the promenade now, engaging with the people, you know, talking to them and getting to know some of the regulars so they get a sense of what's going on, but then also being not just there to stop two foolish men, maybe drunk, you know, too early in the day, getting into a fight, but also, hey, it could be a young pickpocket running down the road, or it could be somebody up to no good, you know, they pull up in a car, but they to rob a place, shoot up a place, kill somebody.
And that is important in the context of having a police presence in all of these areas. It's part of the strategic plan, right, where we would increase our patrols, our presence in the built-up areas as well as in our shopping area, city of Port of Spain, we have the San Fernando, we have all the shopping areas and all the boroughs. So you will eventually see coming closer to the Christmas period,
right,
where you'll have a larger volume of individuals. And the reason for the larger volume is because different branches, sections, and units, we pull officers away from those places and bring them on the streets.
Well, one thing, you have new officers up and coming that might be able to do some of this legwork.
Yes.
So that might change the dynamic. But we have San Fernando on the line. Last caller for the morning. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, ASP Ali.
Good morning.
I have to call and also congratulate you all on that find, even though they have a lot of people saying a lot of things about it. It's guns off the streets. A lot of guns off the streets.
So true.
I want to say something to you, ASP Ali. You are the representative of the TTPS, so therefore the hierarchy of the TTPS, right, on this station when you come here. So don't think we beating up again on you personally, you know. This is a reflection of the frustration of the citizens, and we hope that you would take what we say back to the hierarchy of the police service. So I have to tell you, thanks for coming back week after week. Even though, I shouldn't say this, but sometimes we change our guns on you. But yes, I know it is a hard job. When you look at citizens, I see recently here that there are 3 incidents where witnesses were murdered by guns. And it's a hard process to police the society. Let me ask one thing, and let me ask it quickly. Is there, if a one-man protest, how can one person, do I need permission to have a one-man protest? Could you answer that to me? If I want to go and walk around the parliament with 2 placards in my hand, or around this, do I have to get permission for that? I'll listen off it.
You don't need to get permission for a one-man protest, because one man is not considered to be a crowd.
Okay, so you need it for a crowd.
Yes.
If you're gonna have a crowd.
So you don't need permission.
Regardless of if you're gonna be walking in the road, once it's a crowd of people.
One person alone. One person alone is not. You don't need permission for one person to stand and protest.
Although I would like to see more people protesting, but I leave it up to you to determine, you know, what is necessary to protest and what is not.
I also want to say thanks to the caller for highlighting that we are the media ambassadors, and the media ambassador program was designed for this purpose. We represent the Office of the Commissioner of Police and the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Right? All our programs are recorded. It is through our corporate communication department. We have topics that are assigned to us to speak to on a weekly basis, and feedback from they go through our conversation and hear the comments from the callers and our discourse, and they will share to the commissioner what is the general public consensus of certain areas. Right? So once again, I try my best to represent the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service in the best and the most professional manner. All of our media ambassadors, right? I don't take personally, I don't take any offense that person put that against me, because I understand the frustration and the challenges that they face out there and what they expect of Trinidad and Tobago police officers.
Well, thank
and
you.
the service on the whole.
Thank you, ASP, for being here. Thank you for the callers. I'll just sum up today with 2 quick thoughts. One, I do need the more senior leadership of the TTPS to be better at communication. The media ambassadors can only speak for you so much, and at some point, you know, where leaders can have their press secretary speak, but they still have to speak at some point, and they have to do that well. And if they can't speak well, then they rely on the professionals and the professionals' judgment. And I'll just leave that there. And then the last point is this, and it's to remind, because we've more or less touched on it more than once today, the police is just one arm of our national security apparatus and the criminal justice system. We have issues with the judiciary, we have issues with other aspects of the Ministry of National Security, and technically customs is with the Ministry of Finance. So when we say that stuff is coming through customs, police can't do anything about it until after the fact. And fraud and corruption also has a part to play in that. To what extent, we don't know. So there's a lot of areas where, one, we should be doing our part to not encourage that sort of behavior, but also when we want to complain, yes, the police are like the main crime fighters inside the country, but there are other aspects that we could also complain about as well. And perhaps those other aspects kind of get a free pass a little bit too much sometimes. And it's all on the shoulders of the TTPS. Is that fair? I don't know. I'll leave that up to you. Folks, thanks for everyone. As my coach always says, make today a good day, but you can do so if you try. Don't leave it up to others to do it for you. And we'll see you tomorrow morning. Goodbye.
WESN.
I'm Keaton Shaw, and we are WESN, the content capital.